And we live in Los Angeles, and let me tell you right now, man, we're safe.
We're safe. This is the thing, is like hard to like sit here and watch, because usually I watch the news and I don't really go crazy, but I'm sitting there. I live in the area where it's supposedly happening, and I'm not saying it isn't. It's just I can't hear nothing, bro. I don't see no cop cars. I mean, obviously I see helicopters all the time, but it's like it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
And so many people, you know what, besides what's going on, okay, yes, man, there's protests. There's ICE protests. There's, like the president said, man, there's bad people on both sides.
Yes, absolutely.
There's good people on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a one officer, bro, that was pepper sprayed, and he was rushed inside a Mexican restaurant, and they made him tacos.
And they
fanned him.
They fanned him, bro.
Yeah.
These are people that
See, Fox News won't show that.
Right.
And stop asking people why they don't show this. Okay, you believe in something, so you're gonna be fed that. Other people don't believe in that, so they're gonna be fed a different thing. It's called a narrative, and it's how you present it. You know, like if I'm hardcore liberal, right? Hardcore liberal.
Okay.
I'm gonna show you videos from 10 years ago of people protesting peacefully, just to show that everybody peaceful.
Yes, that's the thing too that's bothering me, is that obviously it's.
No, I'm saying I will show you peaceful protesting from 10 years ago to make it look like all of LA is being peaceful, and I'll show you videos of that video of that one cop stomping that old man that was just going to the Social Security office. Remember that old man was beat up? I will show that video and say that happened in Huntington Park. But see, if I'm from the conservative side, and this is what really happened, I will show that I went to the biggest soccer game in America two Saturdays ago, with Club America versus Los Angeles Football Club, LFC. And if you would have saw Club America, they were wearing yellow, red, and blue, and they marched from, I don't know what street it was, but there was like at least 1,000 of them, and they all walked with yellow, chanting their thing, and they went straight to to play in SoFi, where they play,
right,
the original sports arena, and they had their game, you know, they had their game, man, and the other team was the LAFC, wears black and gold, and they wear black face sometimes, and they're more hardcore, and they have fucking fireworks of black smoke. That's the video they showed as protesters.
Yes.
And they were not protesting.
No.
They were part of the soccer game.
Really? Get the fuck out of here, bro.
The left side was showing that.
The left side was showing that.
And the right side was showing that as the left side was showing it as La Raza, the brown people sticking together for this protest.
Yes.
The conservative side was sharing the same video as these animals. Look how they're dressed like Antifa.
And they're ready to go fuck shit up.
But they're going to a fucking football game.
Right. Yeah.
This is what really happened, bro.
That's weird.
This is how the narrative got mixed up. That LAFC game, why was that?
Yeah.
Hundreds of them marching together dressed in black.
Right.
But, you know, if you don't know soccer, and if you don't know fucking the LAFC, you don't know that's a badass team spirit.
That's the part of the tradition, right?
That's tradition.
Like to march to the as a group of fans.
That's like getting a bunch of Raider Nations people and saying, "Look, bro, Antifa."
Yeah, right. But the thing is that so they took that footage.
The parade.
And then they fucking showed it as like on Fox News or something.
They showed it.
I mean, on both sides.
A lot of influencers were showing it.
Right.
So my people make me proud.
No, dude, what?
And then so somebody from Arcanum, Ohio, one of my relatives, for that wedding.
Yeah.
They don't know shit, bro. They see that, they're getting scared, bro.
My girlfriend came out to pick me up. We're going back to the Bay today, and her dad was like, "I don't think you should go there. It's really bad." And it's like, you know, and he was like, "Is everything okay? Are you near the chaos?" And it's like, people think outside of, I don't know, I even want to say California, but even outside of Los Angeles, that Los Angeles is on fire right now. And that all of California is becoming unasked and it's fucked up. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's people taking a shit on the street in San Francisco. We have a homeless problem in LA. And obviously crime is everywhere. But this became the fourth largest. It went from being the fifth to the fourth largest economy in the country. How is this a bad place? How is like all the country, the rest of the country thinks California is fucked up and a mess, but it's
and then what's crazy about this is that I'm learning a lot of facts about California that I didn't know. I didn't know that California receives less federal funding than any other state.
Yes.
And we pay more in taxes.
Right.
And we receive less.
Alabama, I think it's Alabama,
Mississippi, Georgia,
poorest states.
The poorest states
only survive off of our federal funding.
Yes,
off of the money that we
give them welfare.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
But see how
they hate us.
But it's funny how those people don't know that because they've been served this narrative as we're the freeloader states, and we give welfare to immigrants. And even if that's happening, how the hell is California still paying more and receiving less?
We make the most money.
But if California is really giving, like the narrative is that California gives money to homeless, to immigrants to buy houses.
Yes.
California gives incentives to homeless, doesn't take care of whatever.
Yeah, how are we giving all this money away and we're still
receiving less?
Right. Yeah, it's fucked up. That's the thing, bro. Is I
didn't know these facts, man.
California is getting a bad rap right now for no reason.
I didn't know that without California's taxes, those people wouldn't be able to survive other states.
Those states would have to be. I read into this, and I don't know if it's true because someone kind of argued it with me, but this is what I read. That if it wasn't for California, Alabama wouldn't be Alabama anymore. It would be absorbed by another state that could afford to take care of it. Because it can't. Because the whole reason for states is we're supposed to be able to sustain ourselves.
You know why Alabama's like that? Because Alabama was one of the biggest slave states during the Confederacy. Remember when we were doing the slavery,
right,
and why they went at war? Alabama had Georgia already before there was a Georgia, and they had all those other states around them. And they just were a bigger state.
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
they
were.
Right.
They were the bigger state.
Right.
Because they had all the slaves there, and they were they were the ones that were trying to start other plantation, other states, open up other. They want to open up other states with slavery states.
Right.
Because they broke up Alabama to make it smaller.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing, bros. I never even thought about that. That is poor because there's no other. Like when Alabama became a state, it was strong because of slavery, and it supported slavery.
Yeah.
But now that it doesn't support slavery,
Alabama state broken into two states.
Whoa, bro, that's crazy. I never even thought about that. And it's like, but these people don't realize that. Nobody thinks about this.
That Alabama's territory got smaller after the Civil War.
Whoa, bro, that's crazy, dude. So no wonder they're poor. They don't have any real export. They don't have anything to like make money off of after slavery.
Alabama former 1819. It was not got smaller or got bigger at all. No, actually, Alabama was initially part of the Mississippi Territory.
Okay.
So that became Alabama in 1891
when it broke off.
It used to be part. It became Alabama in 1819. So that means that was part of Mississippi before.
Wow.
Mississippi was the one that owned all the states.
So then it's quite possible that Mississippi would absorb.
Mississippi lose states after the Civil War.
Yeah, dude, that's interesting that you pointed that out because I never even thought about that up until right now. That's probably why they're poor because they don't have a major export anymore, and their major export when they became a state was slavery. So, like, what do you do when all your free help goes away and there's not much else to do? Yeah. You have to survive as a state.
You know, when was the protest? Friday or Saturday? Saturday, right?
You can only find.
How come nobody said nothing when President Obama deported 3 million? All right. How come you didn't say that when President Trump was saying Democrats are weak on immigration?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. If we were doing so much damage, then why weren't you speaking up when your guy was
Because
telling lies?
it doesn't fit their narrative. That's why. Because we got one side saying this guy's not tough on crime, but President Clinton, he's the one that came up with the 3-strike law and the fucking battle ram.
Right.
How is not that tough
Dude,
on crime?
no, yeah.
I mean, Democrats are tougher crime than anybody.
Clinton militarized the police department. That's
Hey, I didn't know.
so much disinformation.
I didn't know. Like the one.
I've never seen
the one with
anybody
the
take
Ali FC. That's the one that was overshared, bro.
Right.
And then I think E-Zone told one of the or something, bro.
What's he doing to be in there? Yeah.
I'm at the age now where
Thank you for joining me today. My name is Sarah Joy, and you are listening to Halidin Music's podcast series on the Baroque era. In today's episode, episode 2, we'll be discussing the stylistic characteristics that were unique to this time period, which was roughly between 1600 and 1750. Some notable composers that you might know from this period are Bach, Handel, Vivaldi, Monteverdi, and many others that I will try to get to throughout this series. Before we get started, I want to let you know that Halidin Music created a wonderful Spotify playlist with the complete pieces that are included in this series. So in the podcast itself, we just play cuts and clips from these pieces, but if you would like to listen to the full versions, you can visit that playlist. Now let's talk about what the word Baroque actually means and where it comes from. The word is derived from the Portuguese word barroco, which means oddly shaped pearl, which seems like a funny term to use to describe any kind of music or art. And actually, during that time period, so 1600 to 1750, if someone used that word to describe a piece of art, they were basically saying that it was grotesque or distorted, misshapen. But many years later, when people started using the word Baroque to describe that particular era, it had lost those negative connotations, and now the term is used to describe something that is grand, dramatic, expressive, with lots of ornamentation. Now, I want you to keep in mind the adjectives that I just used, and we're going to listen to Vivaldi's Concerto for 2 cellos in G minor, Largo. And this particular recording is arranged for cello and contrabass. And I want you to hold those descriptions in your head as you listen, and that might give you a better idea of what people mean when they use the term Baroque to describe this era and the music, literature, art, everything art from this time period. Alright, there are 2 main things that I want to talk about in today's podcast. The first one is the distinction between monophony, homophony, and polyphony. The second one is to talk about basso continuo, or in English it just means continuous bass. Let's start out by defining monophony. Monophony is just a single melodic line without any kind of accompaniment or any other lines that are being played or sung along with it. So it could be a melodic line that's played by multiple instrumentalists. It could just be sung by a single person. It could be whistled, just a tune that's being whistled. Basically, just any melodic line that doesn't have anything else going on with it. No accompaniment, no additional lines. Homophony, this is a melody line that has whistled. Basically, just could be a melodic line any kind of accompaniment or any other. Monophony. Monophony is just a single melodic line without any kind of accompaniment or any other lines that are being played or sung along with it. So it could be a melodic line that's played by multiple instrumentalists. It could just be sung by a single person. It could be whistled, just a tune that's being whistled. Basically, just any melodic line that doesn't have anything else going on with it. No accompaniment, no additional lines. Homophony. This is a melody line that has an accompaniment underneath it. So whenever you see someone sit down and sing, accompanying themselves with the guitar or the piano, that's a great example of homophony, single line with accompaniment underneath. Now polyphony, and this was the main way of writing in the Renaissance period, which was the period directly before the Baroque period. Polyphony is when you have multiple. This is a melody line that has an accompaniment underneath it. So whenever you see someone sit down and sing, accompanying themselves with the guitar or the piano, that's a great example of homophony, single line with accompaniment underneath. Now polyphony, and this was the main way of writing in the Renaissance period, which was the period directly before the Baroque period. Polyphony is when you have multiple independent melodic lines being played or sung at the same time, and each of those lines pretty much is of equal importance. So the top line is important, middle lines super important, and they each have their own personalities, their own characters. They're each their own character. And then the bottom line, again, just as important, its own personality. All right, now I have a listening example for you, which I think is really interesting. It's the Courant from Suite 6. Yes, Suite 6 of Bach's unaccompanied cello suites. And all of his unaccompanied cello suites, they are performed by a single cello player. Some people would say that that is a great example of monophony, but I'm going to argue that this is actually a great example of implied polyphony. And you might be thinking, well, that's kind of confusing. I don't understand. If monophony is just a single line of music, which you just described, then how is that anything like polyphony, which is multiple lines happening at the same time? Well, that is what's so cool about this example, and it shows some of Bach's genius, because he was able to condense multiple lines into a single line. And you can say, you could argue 3 to 4 voices are included in that single line. The number depends on how you analyze it, how you want to look at it. But basically, he had a top line and a middle line, or some middle lines, a low bass line. And each of those lines had their own personality. They were each their own character, and there was interplay between them. But then you might think, okay, well, how did he do that? Well, let's say, for example, there are 2 notes down here, and then you jump up and you play 2 notes up here. Well, yeah, if you look at it like this, it's just a single line, right? You're going note, note, and then you jump up, note, note. And then was interplay between them. But then you might think, okay, well, how did he do that? Well, let's say, for example, there are 2 notes down here, and then you jump up and you play 2 notes up here. Well, yeah, if you look at it like this, it's just a single line, right? You're going note, note, and then you jump up, note, note. But this voice, these 2 notes down here are their own separate voice. This voice has something to say down here. This voice up here, these 2 notes up here, this is a separate character. It has something to say that's different. And so it's a conversation. Somehow Bach managed to write this intricate conversation, this interesting polyphonic conversation, into a single melodic line, which, from the outsider, from first listen, you could think of, well, okay, this is just monophony. But again, I would like to argue, and I hope I did a decent job of presenting my case, that this is indeed a fantastic example of at least implied polyphony. So, okay, I digress. Let's go ahead and take a listen and see if you can catch what I am describing. have at least a general understanding of what those terms mean, I want to talk about how homophony and polyphony were treated and used in the Baroque era, especially in contrast to the previous period, the Renaissance period. So, in the Renaissance era, polyphony was the way that composers thought about music. That's how they wrote. But then, in the Baroque era, the composers started showing interest in an interesting concept. They were attempting to recreate and reconstruct the Greek ideal of music. Now, there was a lot of discussion and debates on how to achieve this because they didn't have a lot to go off of. There wasn't much documentation about what music was like back then. So, after a lot of discussion, a general consensus was that the text, or what we would call the lyrics, were of utmost importance. You know how whenever you're listening to someone speak, their voice has, what is the word for that? A natural inflection. There's kind of a melody built into their speech unless they have a monotone way of speaking. Composers of the time felt that the music underneath should enhance that because they wanted to make sure that the text was being articulated clearly, that the audience could really understand what was being said. Now, as you can imagine, the use of polyphony was basically it worked against this aim, this goal of theirs. Because in polyphony, let's say, for example, you have 6 singers all singing at the same time. You can imagine that the waters would be a little bit muddied, right, in terms of being able to hear the words that they're actually singing. And the composers really, they thought this was a problem. And so what they did to fix it is that they did indeed start heading in the direction of homophony, homophonic writing. So instead of having 6 people singing all at the same time and kind of, making it hard to understand, they would have one person, or I suppose multiple people, singing a single melodic line. That way the audience could clearly hear what was being said, and the music underneath was just there to enhance and support that main line. This was a huge change, an enormous change. It was one of the foundational building blocks of opera. It's basically how our music works today. You turn on the radio, as in polyphony, let's say, for example, you have 6 singers all singing at the same time. You can imagine that the waters would be a little bit muddied, right, in terms of being able to hear the words that they're actually singing. And the composers really, they thought this was a problem. And so what they did to fix it is that they did indeed start heading in the direction of homophony, homophonic writing. So instead of having 6 people singing all at the same time and kind of, making it hard to understand, they would have one person, or I suppose multiple people, singing a single melodic line. That way the audience could clearly hear what was being said, and the music underneath was just there to enhance and support that main line. This was a huge change, an enormous change. It was one of the foundational building blocks of opera. It's basically how our music works today. You turn on the radio and you're going to hear homophonic music. This leads me to talk about the second thing, basso continuo, or continuous bass, which is basically, a single low line that isn't just a held note, right? It's not just a drone, a single note where lots of stuff is happening on top. It's an interesting independent line that goes somewhere, has a beginning, has an end. It takes you on an adventure. So you have this bass line, and then from there you have chords stacked on those notes in the bass line. This line was the harmonic foundation of the entire piece. Now, as we wrap up today's podcast, one of the main takeaways that independent line that goes somewhere, basically, and you're gonna hear homophonic music. This leads me to talk about the second thing, basso continuo or continuous bass, which is basically, a single low line that isn't just a held note, right? It's not just a homophonic music. This leads me to talk about the second thing, basso continuo or continuous bass, which is basically, a single low line that isn't just a held note, right? It's not just a drone, a single note where lots of stuff is happening on top. It's an interesting independent line that goes somewhere. It has a beginning, has an end, it takes you on an adventure. So you have this bass line, and then from there you have chords stacked on those notes in the bass line. This line was the harmonic foundation of the entire piece. Now, as we wrap up today's podcast, one of the main takeaways that at least I've personally gained on those notes in the bass line. This line was the harmonic that isn't just a held note, right? It's not just a drone, a single note where lots of stuff is happening on top. It's an interesting independent line that goes somewhere. It has a beginning, has an end, it takes you on an adventure. So you have this bass line, and then from there you have chords stacked on those notes in the bass line. This line that isn't just a held note, right? It's not just a drone, a single note where lots of stuff is happening on top. It's an interesting independent line that goes somewhere. It has a beginning, has an end, it takes you on an adventure. So you have this bass line, and then from there you have chords stacked on those notes in the bass line. This line was the harmonic foundation of the entire piece. Now, as we wrap up today's podcast, one of the main takeaways that at least I've personally gained from thinking about this topic, I think that one of the biggest shifts was in the conceptualization of how we should analyze and compose music in terms of linear, horizontal versus vertical. And I don't know if I can make this make sense to anyone else, but I'm going to do my best. In polyphonic writing, the emphasis truly was on horizontal, linear movement of every single voice. The change happened with the integration of homophonic writing, and we went from horizontal thinking to more vertical thinking. And so we're thinking and we're analyzing now instead of, again, this linear movement. Instead, we're thinking in terms of chords and stacking notes. We're thinking harmonically rather than melodically. Not entirely, it's not black and white, but I think that there's certainly a shift in emphasis. Regardless of whether I was able to communicate my ideas clearly on that topic, at least you have gotten a sense of what these terms mean and how music was constructed during this era, and the huge importance that these changes had on the music that we listen to today. All right, I think that I talked about everything I wanted to in today's podcast. I hope that you're enjoying the series, and I'm very excited for the next episode. I'm going to be continuing to discuss the stylistic characteristics that were unique during this time period. So I'm very excited about that, and as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Haladin Music's podcast series on the Baroque era. My name is Sarah Joy, and in today's episode, we will be continuing to discuss the stylistic characteristics of the Baroque era, which was roughly from 1600 to 1750. Now, before we begin, I want to let you know about the beautiful Spotify playlist that Haladin Music put together, where you can listen to the full recordings of the pieces included throughout this series. In the podcast itself, we only include small clips from these pieces, but if you would like to listen to the full recordings, you can do that by listening to that playlist. So in our previous episode, I was discussing the difference between monophony, homophony, and polyphony, as well as talking about basso continuo. In today's episode, I have an additional 7 characteristics that really distinguish this time period from others, particularly the Renaissance period, which is the one that came right before the Baroque era. The first thing on my list is fluidity and freedom, specifically rhythmic freedom. Now, in the Renaissance time period, the main way of writing was polyphonic writing, where you had multiple independent lines happening all at once, different text. There was a lot going on. So you can imagine, as a vocalist in that setting, you did not have much freedom. You had to fit in with everybody else, and if you were off, well, that would that would throw everything off. But with the transition into homophony, and specifically monody, that would that would throw everything off. But freedom. You had to fit in with everybody else, and if you were off, well, that would that would throw everything off. But with the transition into homophony, and specifically monody being a term for a single vocalist accompanied by basso continuo, what that allowed the single vocalist to do was to take much more rhythmic freedom, because the accompaniment underneath, their role was to follow the main singer. So you can imagine the amount of freedom that came along with that, and the term that was coined during this time, it was sprezzatura, and it basically just means what I've been describing. And you didn't get carried away with the rhythmic freedom necessarily, but there was I want to say, respectful disregard of the meter. But just in general, that introduced much more freedom, much more rhythmic fluidity into the music of that time. All right, number 2 on my list, ornamentation. And this, again, is thanks to monody, where the main vocalist did have this freedom and this ability to kind of go off for a little bit and do whatever they want, while the people underneath would just follow along. So a few examples of music ornamentation. You have, I think trill is probably the simplest one to explain. You're going very quickly between the core note and the one above. That would be an example of a trill. Mordents, spelled Mordent. It's kind of a funny word to me. Mordents are whenever you start at your core note and then you go up and then you come back down to the core note. That would be an upper mordent. So a lower mordent would be your core note going a step below and then coming back.
Something seems...
Lower mordent. You have turns. So up a note, core note, below the core note, and then back to the core note. Those are just a few examples. And I do actually have a recording example for you to listen to. It includes quite a lot of ornamentation, so that'll give you an even better idea. This is Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 2 in B minor, Movement 1.
Oh.
Alright, so number 3 on my list, this is going to be a little bit difficult for me to explain. I don't think I've ever had to really teach this before, but I'm going to do my best. And this is the difference between primarily tonal writing of the Baroque period versus more modal writing of the Renaissance period. Tonal music, that's mostly what we hear today. Major scales, minor scales, but I do want to explain what modes are. And I'm going to do my very best. This is not the most complete way of doing it, but I think it might be the simplest. A major scale consists of the intervallic order of a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And I'm going to actually use the starting note of G. If we were to not change those intervals of the G major scale, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, but instead we start a note up from G, which is A, and we go to the next A, but we're still keeping the same key signature of G major, which is 1 sharp, F sharp. What it sounds like is such a cool sound, right? And that would be called a Dorian mode, the Dorian mode. Last example, this is the Phrygian mode with the intervals of half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. And then if you just keep going note by note through, you'll encounter the rest of the modes. So number 4 on my list is the freer use of dissonance and voice leading. And the proponents and creators of the newer style were often criticized by the composers that held to the older style of strict contrapuntal writing. You know, counterpoint has very, very strict rules. And so composers of that style looked at the people who were writing in the more homophonic style, who were more concerned about harmonic progression rather than following the strict rules of counterpoint, and they thought, wow, what sloppy writing, how could you? You're ruining music. Monteverdi actually got a lot of criticism for his use of dissonances and voice leading, and it's actually kind of funny the way that he responded to it. Basically his response was, look, I'm trained in both the old style and I know what I'm doing with the new style. If you hear something you don't like, I did that on purpose. It wasn't an accident. So mind your own business was, again, that's a paraphrasing of what Monteverdi said, but that was kind of his response. Number 5, when it came to instrumentation, there was quite a difference in the Renaissance period. The kind of music that they would write, it was expected that could either be sung or it could be played by instruments. So they were very interchangeable. But in the Baroque period, they started writing music specifically for instruments and specifically for vocalists. So instead of instruments just playing what the vocalists would say, that could either be sung or it could be played by instruments. So they were very interchangeable. But in the Baroque period, they started writing music specifically for instruments and specifically for vocalists. So instead of instruments just playing what the vocalists would sing, they actually had their own special compositions written just for them. And then in terms of the combination of the two, so you would have vocalists and instrumentalists playing together. Instead of the instrumentalists just doubling vocal parts, they would have their own special accompanimental parts that would, support. And there was really interesting interplay between accompaniment and main melody vocal lines. Number 6 has to do with form, or the structure of a piece. As opposed to the more through-written approach of much Renaissance writing, the Baroque composers thought more in terms of repeating sections. Sections at the beginning would come back at the end. There were developments of specific musical ideas that would be repeated throughout the piece in different ways. You had variations. So that was a fairly big difference. Number 7 is program music, pieces that were based on a particular narrative or a singular idea or concept. And I think a very good example of this would be Vivaldi's Four Seasons. All of those were based on the idea of the seasons changing and how we can interpret the specific sounds of those seasons through music and how we can paint pictures with music. So I'm going to go ahead and end this podcast by letting you have a listen to Vivaldi's Concerto No. 4 in F minor. This is Winter, Movement 1. right, that is all for today. In the next episode, episode 4, we'll be talking about the. All right, that is all for. All right, that is all for today. In the next episode, episode 4, we'll be talking. Thank you for listening to Haladin Music's podcast series on the Baroque era. My name is Sarah Joy, and in today's episode,
Fuck. There's something wrong in here. Something. 谢谢猫。Fuck.
Musique 3. Changer d'air.
So it goes.
Ugh.